the Super Bowl, Drake got dissed. Our next guest, he wrote the list. And it's a podcast and you will love it. It's the Indy 500.
This week, we're making a little departure from our normal programming to bring you the first in an interview series that we're calling Know Your NME. Conversations and correspondences with people who worked at the NME magazine around the time of the list publication and whose own personal top albums lists were actually calculated and make up the top 500 list itself. Our very first guest in this series is Mr. Alan Woodhouse. I'll let him introduce himself once we get into the interview, but before we do, just in case we didn't say it hard enough while we were talking to him, I just wanted to say that we're both beyond grateful, or I was going to say beyond what us two dummies are able to express in words for Alan talking to us and giving us as much time as he did. And you'll actually hear it in the interview. I was afraid that he would run out of time for us, but he was so gracious with his time and his stories and talking to us about music that it was actually me who ended up being the one who had to run. So before we get to the interview, is there anything you'd like to drop in before we embark on what is maybe the first truly legitimate bit of journalism this podcast has actually ventured into?
I mean, landmark for us, isn't it? Yeah, we're not just playing our little skits.
Yeah, it felt different. It felt like an upgrade.
No, it was an absolute blast, and
it really was.
If any of the other interviews are half as pleasant as that one was, we're in for a treat. It's kind of a shame that he lives all the way over in Glasgow, because he's a guy I wouldn't mind sitting down with at the pub for 4 hours.
If for some reason we find ourselves on the other end of the world, yeah, for sure.
Exactly. All right. Absolute treat. Hope you guys enjoy.
Joining us today for our first ever guest interview is Mr. Alan Woodhouse. And Mr. Woodhouse worked at NME magazine for over 15 years, starting in the early 2000s. And he is one of the few people whose personal rankings of albums were actually used to compile the list itself. So, Alan, thank you for taking the time to talk to us and shed a little bit of light on the list that's kind of rapidly becoming a large part of our lives.
Okay.
But before we grill you on all our burning questions, can you tell us just a little bit about you and where you're currently working?
So I am not living in London. When I was at NME, I was living in London. I lived in London for 20 years, but in 2015, I left NME. I worked at a magazine called Shortlist for a while, but then I got married and we've got 2 kids now, and we decided, me and my wife, who used to be in a band called the Fairies Band, and she's an artist. We wanted to raise our kids somewhere else other than London, and so we moved up to Glasgow. I'm actually Scottish myself, but that wasn't the main reason we moved up. My wife wanted to be in a city that had a decent art community as well. Mm-hmm. So we thought about Glasgow, Manchester, Bristol, but we decided on Glasgow. And when I came up here, I was very lucky because I'd been freelancing and things, and after a couple of months, I got called into a magazine you may have heard of called The Big Issue, which is
when I was looking into you have a really well written LinkedIn profile, and it said that that's where you had started and you returned there.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. My first ever piece that I wrote for The Big Issue was on Belle and Sebastian in 1996.
That one's near and dear to my heart.
Well, funnily enough, I ended up going to review them at the Hollywood Bowl for NME in 2006. So it was all very strange. And now 2 of them live very near me in Glasgow. I've met all of them, up with all of them in Glasgow, but 2 of them live very near me. In fact, one of them, Stevie, his kid goes to my daughter's school, so I see him on the school run quite often. So it's
so
it's really weird how it's all happened, because I'm from Edinburgh. I'd never lived
in and out at the times.
Well, I'd never lived in Glasgow before. I'm from Edinburgh, so but I love it. It's great. And anyway, the editor of the Big Issue, Paul McNamee, he worked with me at NME in the early 2000s. So he got me in for some shifts, and I haven't left. So that's where I am now. In fact, speaking to you now, having just put next week's magazine to bed, so that was why I was a bit delayed. So
you said
we are.
It's publication day, right? So are we catching the start of your weekend, basically? Or?
Yeah, it's sort of. Well, funny enough, I'm in tomorrow, and then I'm off for a week. It's actually my birthday on Friday, so I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it's my birthday on Friday, which is also Valentine's Day. So we like to call it Alentine's Day. Yeah.
Well, happy 31st birthday in advance.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So you've actually caught me quite a good time, because the magazine's gone to bed and it's quite quiet, so I can chat to you, no problem, in the office.
Excellent. So the first thing I wanted to ask was, what was it like in and around the NME at the time that the list was being compiled or published?
Yeah, I saw your question earlier, and I was actually trying to articulate what it was like, because it was coming towards the end of my time at NME, but there was a lot of new young writers had come in. So it was kind of strange time, and a new editor had come in the year before. It was 2013 that the list got compiled. But 2012, Chrissy, who had been the first female editor of the NME, she left, and Mike Williams took over, and it was a sort of period of flux, because it was kind of getting down towards the magazine becoming free, and then ultimately becoming publishing in general was winding down a little bit, and I think NME was struggling a bit, and I think that was possibly, from my interpretation of it anyway, would be that was one of the reasons why they might have had a list like that, because they wanted to. It was lists that sell, certainly sold then, and they wanted to update it. I think 2003 had maybe been the last time they'd had a list. I think I might be wrong about that, but certainly we definitely did have one in 2003. We may have had one in the interim, but I don't recall it. But anyway, 2013 seemed like a good time. 500 seemed excessive to me, but that was the sort of, and I think there was an appetite for a new list from the NME, so I can understand why they decided to go for it. But it was a strange time, because, as I say, there was new people coming in. There's some really brilliant new writers coming in, and there was also a few people who were possibly on their way out. I certainly was. I was thinking about the future at that time. I think I'd only just got together with a person who would eventually become my wife and things like that. So we were thinking about maybe moving on, and it was and I'd been there a long time, but yeah, it was still exciting, but it wasn't quite the excitement of the early noughties or whatever. I think even musically, it was a little bit staid around that time, and although there was still some great stuff, it wasn't quite the way it was. So it was maybe time to take stock and take a look back, and it's always interesting as well, isn't it, to see what people think are, because even I'm just looking to the side there at the list now and thinking there are a few things that I certainly find contentious about it, but you can also see the influence of the younger generation on that. That was, yeah. There's a couple of people who I whose names I have in mind who had really given the magazine a shake. Laura Snapes being one of them, and there's other people like Emily Mackay and Ben Patashnik was here around that time. Anyway, there's lots of new young people who had come in, and
we had actually just last episode had kind of a talk on how much, if it felt like a gamble, or if it felt like going out on a limb when, in 2013, there's a couple of albums that are only, there's one that had come out just a few months before, the Arctic Monkeys AM, and there's a lot of them that are very new. Like, do you know if other people felt like they were, making it a gamble or like putting a stamp on a particular band by doing that?
Yeah, I admit I thought you might bring that up. I noticed that it's actually the AM had only just come out a few months earlier, but I noticed that whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not, was in the top 20. But I mean, Arctic Monkeys were by far and away NME's biggest band at that time. In fact, that summer they'd appeared on the cover for the Glastonbury coverage, even though the Rolling Stones were headlining on the Saturday night at Glastonbury. We got access to Arctic Monkeys headline, and Matt. There's another name who I should bring up, Matt Wilkinson, who was a brilliant writer, and he is my friend, but he is a brilliant writer. He now works for Apple Beats. He got access to them all day on the Friday and spent the whole day with them at Glastonbury, which is probably what influenced them being on the cover. But also, they were by far and away NME's biggest band. They had also just released probably I think most people would accept their best album since the first album, that was them just launching it, wasn't it? They hadn't released it yet, but they played 2 new songs off it that night at Glastonbury, so they were massive. So they were always going to feature quite heavily, and the album got 10 out of 10 in the NME as well. So it was going to be, You're right about what your theory is probably correct. It was people taking a chance of what it was going to be, how it was going to be perceived in the future. Yeah. And I mean, it's still, I suppose in a way they were right, because it's still perceived as a classic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the magazine ended up saying that was their top. I want to say it was either the top of the decade or it was something where it came back a long time after, because I remember seeing it and saying, oh well, they stuck with it.
Yeah.
Landed at number 1, I think, for the 2010s, and I mean that's testament to that gamble.
Yes, and Is This It was voted number 1 of the 2000s as well, and that's number 4 on the list. So so that does reflect how people felt about those records. I also noticed when I was flicking through the list earlier that Daft Punk Random Access Memories made its way in there very, very near the end of and that was another one that was big in the office at the time. I remember. I mean, it was a big album generally, but I can see why that had made it in. But also, those albums, when you're doing those lists, those albums are fresh in people's memories, so they want to go, I want to put this in because I love it at the moment, and you probably don't think, look, maybe you don't think longer term. Maybe you just think, this is great now, I just want to put this in because it's awesome,
Yeah.
It's hard not to have that recency bias.
Yeah, totally.
But that was also one of the fun things about the list, was that we saw, because when we first theorized doing a show like this, we did look at the different big lists of other magazines' albums and stuff, and there was some that seemed too, a little too safe or a little too general. But when we kind of zeroed in on the NME and kind of remembered the way that NME magazine had kind of weaved in and out of our young lives at the around the same time, or in the early 00s, we said, I feel like we like this one best. Like,
yeah, it's certainly an interesting list, and some people might take a little bit of umbrage with some of the albums that are up there, and we were talking about it in our office today because I printed it out to have a look at it, because it'd been a while since I've seen it, and some people were, and again, it was, I suppose, it fulfills its purpose really, because there was a few people round me having a look at it today, and they were going, well, that should be lower, that should be higher. That's the whole point of a list like that. It's the whole point, and no one's ever going to agree. And there was times, I mean, obviously, in that whole time that I was at NME, we did a lot of lists, and there were times where I thought, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I'm even looking now at the list, and I'm thinking that there's artists there that I think, is that even their best album that's in the top 10? Is it even their best record? It's all a matter of opinion, isn't it? But
yeah, and it's fun the way that it was put together almost absolves it of, because every time that we start scrolling through or looking through the list on the show, we say, well, look at this is right above this other thing. But it's the way it was put together, there's no one person you can point at and say, like, they did this, or they're the reason that this is outranking this.
Well, the one thing I did remember about it, though, that will probably, you may or may not know this, but it'll probably make you laugh, is that I mentioned Laura Snapes earlier. Now, Laura's a very dear friend of mine, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying, but she put as her top five national albums.
Yes, we've talked about this. so other than her, were there other people? I mean, she's allowed to say, she's allowed to have her opinion, stand by it. But do you think there was other people who were kind of, gaming the system a little bit, or putting something high just to say like, I need this to be in the list somewhere?
Well, there were definitely partisan decisions. I put my hand up as well, because again I was looking through it, and I see that at number 92 is Radiator by Superfurry Animals. Now, Superfurry Animals were probably the band I loved most when I was at the NME, and I did lots of stuff with them over the years. I even got to dress as a Yeti in a photo shoot. Yeah, so I got to do a lot of stuff with them, and that is my favourite album of theirs. And I don't actually recall what I had in my top. There are some I definitely recall, but I know that would have definitely been in there, and there's absolutely no question I would put that high to make sure that it got the credit it deserved, because for me they're a band that don't get the credit they deserve. I know that they're critically acclaimed and everything, but I just don't feel that they quite were as big as they should have been for a band who are just for me I genuinely do think they're one of the greatest bands of all time.
And did you or anybody else have access to like other people's lists before publication? And do you interact and say like, why, I can't believe you have this, or why?
Yeah, I think we chatted. I think a couple of us, from what I remember, a couple of us sent emails back and forth saying, "What do you think of this? What do you think of this?" And then it would be like, "Yeah, I can't believe you haven't put this in." And you're like, "Oh God, they've got a point," So you would sort of alter it slightly if you've forgotten something. But generally, we would actually keep it to ourselves, because it was kind of quite exciting to see what would come out of it, And there were some nice surprises. There were also some where I would be like looking at it, going, I'm not sure about that. But it was fun. I always seen it as a bit of fun, and it was interesting to see what people would come. Yeah, it was interesting to see what people would ultimately choose. Not necessarily things that I would agree with, but hey ho.
Yeah. Is there anything that came out after publication where you say like, if there was an update right now, like, is there anything that you feel like would move, or something new that would get put on there?
It's a great question, and it's one I've considered since you sent it to me this afternoon to give me a heads up. And I'm glad you did, because it really made me think. One of the things I would say, which is possibly quite controversial, I don't know, is I'm not necessarily sure the Queen is Dead would be at number one anymore. I think that Morrissey has tarnished the Smiths' reputation. Well, I'm going to say it because I think this. I think Morrissey's tarnished the Smiths' reputation to such an extent that I'm not sure that people would necessarily want to vote for it. That's a good. The thing is, as well, the Queen is Dead, is that I love that record, but I would say there's an argument for it not being the Smiths' best album as well. And I think that has actually come in recent years. That's been subject I've debated with quite a lot of my friends. So I think that might not necessarily be in its place anymore.
Yeah, it seemed like maybe the album was getting a bump because he's such a fun interview, and that everybody. I had read somewhere else at least a few of the contributors that said that they love interviewing Morrissey, so he could be having some influence there as well.
Funnily enough, when the Queen is Dead turned 20, I got to we did a cover feature on it in the NME, so that's 2006, and I got to interview all of the Smiths about it, apart from Morrissey, who had actually agreed to do it, but then pulled out at the last minute, so we had to use archive interview for him, but I got Johnny Marr and Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce, and they were all amazing. They were all absolutely amazing. Johnny Marr was just a dream, and he's one of my favourite ever guitar players. So to be able to speak to him about it, and I was able to tell him the story of being 13 and getting my first Walkman. And I was on doing my newspaper round in this village that I lived in just outside Edinburgh, 1985, and I used to record the charts off the radio. and I would record songs I found interesting, and I recorded How Soon Is Now off the radio because it was in the charts. And I remember thinking on my way, telling him that I was thinking on my way around, I've never heard a song like this before, but I love it and I can't explain why. And I told him this, and he loved it. He loved that story. So he then he then told me something that he hadn't. And I checked back, and it was true that he'd never told an interviewer before, and that was that they asked Linda McCartney to play on The Queen Is Dead. They asked her to play piano on Frankly Mr. Shankly, but she rejected. She turned them down. But they loved Linda McCartney, I think, because she was a vegetarian and quite a vocal vegetarian, and because they felt she got unfairly maligned, So they asked her to do it, but she said no. But anyway, yeah. And I got to meet him a couple of years later, and we talked about this. And I know that How Soon Is Now is not on The Queen Is Dead, but I just thought it was an interesting little story to come off that. But anyway, yeah, they were all amazing. And at that time, it was certainly, especially as it was the anniversary, it was certainly gaining sort of the status of being the Smiths' best album. But I think Strange Ways and Meet Is Murder both, not the first album, but I think Strange Ways and Meet Is Murder both have strong claims as well to be the best record. Great band, no question about it. But I just think that Morrissey's upset a few people in recent years, so I think that would affect things. That would affect things. But in terms of albums that would maybe be on there that have come out, the one that sticks to, there's a few that I thought about, but the one that sticks into my head is, or the one artist that sticks in my head is Lana Del Rey. It would probably be quite high up. Yeah. I think there are other bands that the NME have covered since that might be in with a chance of being in there, like the 1975. Also Kendrick Lamar, Tyler the Creator. That hip hop has become much bigger, even bigger since then. And I think artists like that would certainly be making their way in there. I think that would. Yep. Trying to think of guitar bands, and there aren't that many really. Tame Impala. Tame Impala would probably be quite high up. I think they would be. Lonerism was NME's album of the year in 2012. So I think I can't. I checked to see if it was in the 500 earlier, and I couldn't find it, but it probably is.
And I think Kendrick, Tyler, and Tame Impala all came up in the conversation we had about what are the newer things that we can definitely that we would definitely put a tag on and say that's great.
Yeah, but also one of my friends was talking to me about it today, and he made a really good point. The whole thing about albums have changed as well. Like albums aren't revered as much as they used to be. My son is 15, and he listens to albums now. He got a turntable for his Christmas, and he's listening to a lot of albums. He buys vinyl. Costs quite a lot of money, but he buys vinyl. I'm really pleased he's doing that though, because it's good for him to. I took him to see the Bob Dylan film a couple of weeks ago, and he ended up getting 3 or 4 Bob Dylan albums for his birthday the other week, and that's great, and so he's understanding. So he's got Blonde on Blonde, and that to me demands to be listened to as a whole. So it's brilliant that he's doing that. But I was saying to him when he first started listening to music and started getting into bands, Arctic Monkeys was one of his early loves. Gorillaz, he loved Gorillaz, but quite often it would just be songs he would talk to me about. He wouldn't talk to me about the albums. And he would talk to me about certain songs, individual songs. I remember him saying to me, "Have you heard the song Heads Will Roll by Yeah Yeah Yeahs?" And I was like, "Yeah, but have you listened to Fever to Tell, the first album, or Show Your Bones, the second album?" They said they're brilliant albums. Have a listen to them. They demand to be, like I was almost like pleading with them to listen to the album.
It's become a singles game at this point. They hear one song, and that's okay. What's the next track? What's the next track? Who's the next artist?
Yeah, so I think that they understand that albums have almost like sort of they've coming back in with with vinyl becoming cooler again with young people, but I think they went through a little spell, especially with Spotify and things like that, where people would make compilations rather than listen to records as a whole. But maybe that's turning around again. So I'm always saying to Elvie, my son, to listen to the album. Listen to there's one of my favourites, and the one that came top of my list, which I do definitely know came top of my list in this. One of my favourite albums of all time is "Loveless" by Mama De Valentine, and that demands to be listened to from beginning to end. That's not take a single song off that album. In fact, I had a chat with Kevin Shields. That sounds like I'm name dropping, and I'm really not, because I was reviewing.
Go right ahead.
I had a chat with Kevin Shields, and I struck up a little friendship briefly after My Bloody Valentine came back in about 2007, 2008, and I was trying to get an interview with him for the NME. He wasn't really up for talking, but he was up for talking informally. And so we got chatting quite a few times. When I reviewed them at their gig in London, I got chatting to him afterwards, and we were talking about Loveless. And I said to him, Loveless is one of my favourite records, and said, I'd heard a story that aside from the little instrumental that the drummer does on the album, that each track on side one corresponds to each track on side two. Is that true? And he said, yes, it absolutely is. They're like, they're little partners. So that to me indicated that you need to listen to that. And also all the songs bleed into each other as well, don't they? They don't.
Yeah.
So it demands to be listened to as a whole.
Yeah, you'd be kind of missing a part if you're not.
Absolutely.
Listening.
So that's so as well as being one of my favourite ever records, that is a classic example of how you should listen to an album as a whole.
Yeah, one of the first albums we reviewed on our show was Patti Smith's Easter. And on Spotify now, one of the tracks has been removed because of its controversial name, Rock and Roll. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're listening to Babalog, and all of a sudden, you get to this big crescendo and onto the next track, and it's not there. It just kind of highlights, that importance of having everything as the artist intended. And
we talked about it. But even worse is, most people's default view of Spotify is to, if a track's removed like that, you don't see it at all. So when people load Easter, they don't even know that it's gone unless they have that setting on.
Oh, it's a shame, eh? But
that was quite a first episode. and we weren't familiar with it. So at our very, very first episode, it was mostly about the list itself. And I took a lot of info from the Pat Long book that you had noted in the one of your last articles that's up on NME.
Yeah, Pat was one of my best friends. Sadly, passed away in 2018. Yeah,
mm-hmm. But I am into that book now, and we took a ton of info from it on our first episode. So yeah, I definitely wanted to get in and say thank you for recommending it and doing that write up, because it almost served as the kickoff here for what we were doing.
Oh, which one was that? Was that his obituary?
Yes. I actually listed the last three articles that I saw from you on NME's site was that Alan Partridge's 10 most Alan Partridge moments ever, and then also Jules Holland.
That's right. Yeah, 10
most memorable.
Yeah,
Jules Holland performances.
That was really fun. I'd left by then. I was just doing freelance stuff for them. So yeah, that was just there. That was in my interim between getting another job. So yeah, I enjoyed doing that. But yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned Pat as well, because although Pat wasn't at NME by then, he wrote the history of the magazine, which came out in 2012, and he was such a massive part. He left in 2008, I think, but he was such a massive part of my early time at NME, and we had very similar taste in music. So a lot of the albums he would have chosen for this would have been the same as me. Like, he would have had My Bloody Valentine in there. His book about the NME is just fantastic as well. I thoroughly recommend it to anybody.
Me too. I'm in the middle of it right now.
Yeah.
One thing in that article that you mentioned that like super resonated for us was that you had said that you and him would create fake moment in rock history headlines. And the example I wrote down was in 1990, David Bowie's Chicken Kiev range is withdrawn from sale.
I'm trying to think of some more. Shaun Ryder eats a live squirrel while high. That was a good one. P. Diddy pays to have his butler gold plated. That was a good one. The thing is, we did it for. Phil Collins is arrested for stealing hubcaps. all this sort of stuff. Prince attends the Scottish Cup final. So we did all this sort of stuff, but no one noticed for ages. No one noticed.
Well, that's what's great about it.
But then eventually Connor, the editor at the time, thought it was so funny that he just thought, oh, let's just leave it then, just like tell lies. But it was so much fun, so much fun.
Yeah, we're guys who do stuff like that too, and it may have been in my mind when it was inspired, but actually last episode um, we did a fake live ad read for Morrissey's authentic Texas barbecue smokehouse.
Amazing. Yeah.
And we had different plates and stuff that just had like pun names from song titles and things like that. But yeah, that was fun and kind of possibly inspired by reading about that.
Yeah, well, the thing is with Pat, I think it was one of the reasons we got on so well was we shared a similar sense of humor, and we just had so much fun doing that job. We realized that it wasn't really working for a living. It was just having fun. We could hardly believe that we're getting paid to do this stuff. I mean, it was so much fun. It was a dream come true for me. That was all I wanted to do when I became a journalist. I wanted to work at the NME. So it's funny that we're talking about the list in 2013, because by that time it was getting, my time was running down, and I left not long after that, having got sick as well in the meantime, in 2014. But anyway, that was just the best fun. Honestly, it was amazing. You were talking as well about, sorry to just slightly change the subject, but you were talking as well about how things that might have changed in the time since. Mm-hmm. And another thing is that one thing that we haven't touched on is bands who have in that time, who not necessarily new bands, have had a new lease of life. And one of the bands, and certainly from my point of view, and I think from a lot of people's point of view, I just caught my eye looking at the list there of an album sleeve by them, and I think they would be higher now, is Talking Heads. Talking Heads have become, in my last 10 years, have rapidly become one of my favourite bands of all time, having never really listened to them that much before then. I obviously knew them and respected them, but didn't give them a proper listen until actually during the pandemic. I thought, you know what, I'm going to listen to all of their albums, because I hear so many people listing them as an influence. And I hear people like Tom York talking about Remain in Light as being such a good record. So I'm going to actually listen to it. My God, what a band. What a band. So they would be far higher. They would be in my list now, where they weren't in my list before. Certainly Fear of Music and Remain in Light. And I think they would be in a lot of people's lists. So I think that they might find themselves shooting up a little bit now if you were having a vote now.
Yeah. I had kind of the same experience, but I thought it was due to becoming a dad and becoming a little older, and maybe my tastes had aligned. But it seems like a lot of people are kind of rediscovering that at the same time.
Well, maybe
I know for me, when I got to see Stop Making Sense in theaters when they re-released that was definitely kind of an aha moment for me. Like, okay, I loved the singles before, but now I get the Talking Heads.
Yeah, oh, amazing. I often always wonder as well, like. Why, because I was 18, 19 when Nirvana hit really big, and whilst I thought they were great, they were obviously a tremendous band, and they appear so high in everybody's polls. I never thought they were that great, and but the generation that followed me, and the couple of generations that followed me. I remember one of them, Dan Martin, who worked with me at NME, who sadly has also now passed away. He said to me, "You do realise that the generation after you, and then the generation after that, to them they're like the Beatles." Mm-hmm. And then it sort of suddenly struck me, and then I was like, I saw them twice. I saw them play twice,
and that's when people go.
And people go, and then you're like, "Oh my God, this is what." If you're saying to someone from the 60s, if they say, "Oh, I hung out with the Kinks or the Stones or whatever, or the Beatles," you think you think, "Oh my God, that's amazing." To them, you meeting Nirvana or seeing Nirvana play is like the holy grail to them. And so when I see, because I saw Nevermind's in the top 10, isn't it? I realised, it's number 11. I realised that to them that's their almost maybe their Beatles is putting it a bit too is a bit much, but and then also remember it's like over 30 years ago now. It feels like yesterday. It feels like yesterday. It feels like yesterday to me.
Yeah, you're
But
preaching to the choir.
they are farther away. They're as far away now as the Beatles were to us in the '60s. It's amazing, isn't it? When you think at it like that.
Well, we had grown up in the Seattle suburbs too during the time that Nirvana was coming up, and
Right.
Still to this day, I think my friend and I here have the unpopular opinion that maybe they weren't the best Seattle band at the time, and
Right.
Is that even their best album? Or I don't know, but they're huge to a lot of people, but maybe to us, we'd go with Alice in Chains or Soundgarden or
Right.
one of a number of acts, but here they are at number 11.
But then sometimes you put those albums back on and you say, but they were so good too. It's a wealth of options, though.
It's also, I like using the Beatles analogy because although it's got an absolutely horrific end, it's a great story as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas the Beatles story is a great story. So it's that sounds really cynical to say that, but it just is. But yeah, I find stuff like that interesting. I just find it because your idea and your thinking about it might be different from a younger person's. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's like as well at NME. Quite often people would go to me, "Oh, you were at Nirvana, Reading '92 is a good example. The Stone Roses in 1990." I'm just trying to think of big gigs that I was at that people ask me about. Even the Strokes, seeing the Strokes in 2001, people talk about it like they ask me about it, and you think to yourself, not all of these gigs were all that, they weren't as great as people make them out to be now.
And at the time, you don't know that it's going to be that.
No, absolutely not. Mind you, then there are ones that are revered now, like Pulp at Glastonbury in 1995 that I was at, that were what people think they were. They were very, very David Bowie at Glastonbury. They were very much what people think they were. They were amazing. But then it's all subjective, isn't it? It's all your own opinion. I'm sorry. I'm probably rambling quite a lot.
Not at all.
I just love talking about music, so I'm quite happy.
We love hearing about it, and we're over the moon to have somebody who actually influenced the list and was there. But one specific question that we did want to ask is there a reason why no UK metal bands show up on the list, like Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest? That was the one big question we had looking at it, because we lean a little metal, and then it was sort of Slayer and Metallica do show up, so it's not that it was just not a thing. So
it's a really good point, and it's something that I've considered, because there were metal fans at NME. There were metal fans. I think it's a very hard one. I think it's possibly because that sort of stuff is covered by Kerrang, and people, even though if they liked metal, almost felt like they couldn't say it NME because it was considered. It wasn't played very much in the office. I'm surprised Black Sabbath aren't in there though, and that's. I'm interested that you mentioned them, because obviously they've just announced their farewell gig.
Yep.
And my son's friend he just started learning playing guitar. Been playing guitar for the last few years. His dad got him a stool with a Black Sabbath stool to play his guitar on. He decided to try and to investigate the band, and they've now become his favourite band of all time. And he's going to the farewell gig. He absolutely worships them, and it's gonna sound. I'm trying to put it without sounding. They would, to me, be a sort of really good example of a band, a heavy rock band that would fit the sort of NME profile for someone who writes for NME. So I'm very surprised that they're not in there.
This is as good of an explanation as we've received so
far. Iron Maiden, I've never heard any of that those kind of bands played in the office. I heard Black Sabbath, but never heard Iron Maiden. What other ones would you think would possibly have gone in there? And that to me is a surprise. I mean, Iron Maiden headlined Reading in 2006. They're certainly not disliked. Why they were not on anybody's list, I couldn't quite figure out. Maybe the people just thought they don't quite fit the NME profile that much. But you can see I'm struggling to articulate that because I can't really answer it. I don't really know.
One thing we had theorized too is maybe with bands like Iron Maiden and Sabbath, it's even more of, if you spun a greatest hits, people would know, all the songs and appreciate it. But like as for rolling out like a singular album, I mean, maybe you could say like, Number of the Beast for Iron Maiden, or you could say the first Black Sabbath album, but there's not necessarily a defining album of those bands that you'd put on a top 500 list.
No, that's a good example. Whereas someone like Metallica, you could have which Metallica album's on there? I presume it's either Metallica or Master of Puppets. It's got to be one. I
believe it's Master of Puppets.
Master of Puppets. That's a sort of defining album for them, isn't it? That does appear on quite a lot of best of lists. It's a strange one. It's a strange one. You were talking earlier on about the Seattle bands as well. It's only Nirvana really of the Seattle bands that even though there was lots of them, Pearl Jam don't really fit the NME. Even though they're seen as a classic rock band, you don't really see them appearing on any NME lists or whatever as well. And then you've got things like when you get to the sort of commercial side of hard rock, you'll have Appetite for Destruction in there, but you don't have much else, do you? Not a huge amount.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be classic indie, classic 60s, and the odd really good classic hip hop album. That tends to be, and some pop.
And that kind of, as we were picking the lists was, it's a big, that makeup is a big reason of why we landed on the NME's list, is because that gels with us. Like there's not going to be as many, because what we do is, we try it. So far we've been able to go weekly. We've had 3 episodes, and at the end of every episode we spin a random number generator to tell us what the next album is going to be. And when we thought about doing that, we thought about it and we're like, which list do we look at, and how many times are we going to spin something random and say like, how many times are you going to spin and say, I don't know that? Or how many times are you going to spin and say, I love that? And it looked like with the NME that we were going to be about, 50-50 on things that we had heard of or loved versus something that we were going to be discovering, which sounded fun.
So what have you, I'm asking you a question now. So what have you discovered so far that you, when you've done it, has anything taken you by surprise?
So right now, so the first episode was Patti Smith's Easter, which I think the two of us, we knew who Patti Smith was. We maybe had not listened to that. Well, we clearly had not listened to that album because we ended that episode very excited, even though we didn't realize that we were going to have a serious discussion in that episode. And then at the end of that episode, we spun and we got Laura Marling's "I Speak Because I Can," which was brand new to us. So that's something that was a discovery. And then on the end of her episode, and the album that we're listening to this week is the Shins' "Shoots Too Narrow," which was
I love that album.
Listening to it this week, it's been easy to play that one over and over again.
It almost feels criminal too. We're living so close to Sub Pop Records and everything, and here we are, like 20 years later, finally getting into this album. Like, oh, this is right in our backyard the whole time. Oops.
Yeah,
he is James Mercer is an amazing lyricist, an absolutely incredible lyricist. I reviewed the third album for NME, "Wincing the Night Away," which at the time I thought was better than "Shoots Too Narrow," but actually, really, here you go, you change things. In retrospect, I'd say "Shoots Too Narrow" is their best album. But the first album's very good as well, "O Inverted World." That's got new slang on it, which is what introduced them to the world, really, because it's in Garden State.
Yeah, I had just heard. I was listening to an interview for research, and he said basically right when they ended touring for "Shoots Too Narrow" is when that movie came out, and they were all but forced to get back on a bus and go out because that song had broke so big from the movie.
And "Shoots Too Narrow" is it's got so many good songs on it. The one that always stuck out for me is "Mine's Not a High Horse." That was my favourite. And then Young Pilgrims as well. And "So Says I." There's so much. "Gone for Good." There's "Kissing the Lipless." So many good songs in that album. Glad you got to have a deep dive in that.
Yeah. come, but yeah, I think the track that jumped out at me, at least on that one, was Saint Simon.
Oh, it's beautiful,
and
isn't it?
I saw on your top 10 list you have the Zombies, Odyssey, and Oracle. And the first time I heard that track, I said, "This sounds like somebody reaching back to the Zombies." Like, it sounds so good.
Odyssey and Oracle. Have you got my top 10 there?
I do have your top 10. Would you
Oh,
like me to
right.
read it?
Yeah, but just to say about Odyssey and Oracle, which again, as an album, yeah, I'm really glad you brought up Odyssey and Oracle, because that's an album that me and Pat both loved, and we love the fact that Odyssey's misspelled as well in the title. But also, This Will Be Our Year from that album was my wife and I's first dance at our wedding. That was our
Really?
first song. Yeah. She is. Yeah, I just love that record. So yeah, can I guess some of my 10? Because I've not
Okay.
seen it. I've not seen it for over 10 years. So Odyssey and Oracle. I would imagine Loveless is in there. My Bloody Valentine.
So you've got two of the 10.
Yeah. Oh God. See, the thing is, this could have changed in that time. That is Murmur by REM in there.
Yes, at number 7 you have REM's Murmur.
Yeah. This is good. I like this.
And on your profile you said you're the one who has to come up with games for your coworkers and quizzes. Is that right? So we're kind of almost impromptu doing one of these.
Yeah.
Okay. So far you've got 3 of 10.
3 of 10. Marquee Moon must be in there, surely.
Yes, that's the number 2. So you've got 4 of 10.
16 Lovers Lane by the Go-Betweens. Did that make it?
Yep, that's number 5.
Oh wow, I'm doing well.
You've got half your list already.
Is Forever Changes in there? It may not be.
Yep.
Or
Number 4 by Love. Okay.
Pet Sounds.
6 of 10. You're on a roll. Yep. 7. You've got
Sounds.
7 of 10 now.
Oh wow, this is. You know what? What about Brighter Later?
But here's where it gets hard. Yep, number 10, Nick Drake. Brighter Later. You are 8 for 8.
I've said Forever Changes, haven't I? Pet Sounds.
Oh, I think we had guessed that one already though.
Oh, okay. 2 to go. What would they be?
I think you're only missing number 8 and number 9.
Oh, I might be struggling now.
Yeah, it's a game that gets harder as you go.
Give me a clue. Are any of them recent?
Okay. No.
Have I picked a clue? I'm
trying
to work out if I've maybe.
I could give you initials for number 8. NY.
NY. What, the name of the artist or the name of the album?
Our name of the artist.
Neil Young.
Yes.
After the Gold Rush.
Correct. That's number 8.
And what about the other one? Because I'm struggling.
Number 9, I'll give you initials for the band. It's P, and for the album it's SR.
P.
One word.
Oh, Pixies, Surfer Rosa.
You got all 10. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Amazing.
That wouldn't be too different now, although there are so many bands that people that have not in there that have missed the cut. That like Bowie, there's got to be a Bowie. I think it was too hard to put a Bowie album in. Velvet Underground. Mm-hmm. Nick Cave.
Well, and there's things where you might look at those and say, like, I know everybody else is gonna, I'm not saving them from number 501 if I put them down. Like, I know they're gonna be in there. So, well,
Super Furry Animals must have been in the top 20 because I think we were all told to give 50 albums, so because that's why there's people.
Yeah, Super Furry Animals Fuzzy Logic came in at 245, so it broke the halfway point.
Yeah, and Radiator is at 92.
Oh, there you go. Yes. Are
you familiar with that band?
I am not.
Give them a listen. They're a psychedelic pop experience. Those 2 records, Fuzzy Logic and Radiator.
All right. Well, we always have a few extra albums that we're also listening alongside, so I'm going to slot that in.
Okay, just my little recommendation.
All right. So Are there any specific albums that you think are going to make like notable episodes for good or bad? Like if we got to the end, if we got to the end of it, if we were going to spin it like the end of this episode and decide our next one, like, is there anything that might pop up where you'd say like, oh, you're in trouble or you're in for a great time?
One that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and it's an album that I didn't appreciate at the time, but now I absolutely love, and I can see it on the list there, is It Takes a Nation of Millions by Public Enemy. Because my son's just getting into hip hop, and he was asking me about what great hip hop albums are. So I went back and revisited that, because I remember thinking, me and my brother were talking about, because there was a documentary on Public Enemy on BBC about 10 years ago, and we were speaking to each, because my brother's a big music fan as well, and we were speaking to each other about afterwards, saying we didn't realise at the time, because we weren't really attuned to listening to hip hop at 16 in suburban Scotland, we just didn't feel like it was our thing. But listening to it now, it sounds like a sort of punk album. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah. And we really started to appreciate it. And I just think that it resonates even now, even more than ever. Certainly in the way things are these days, I think it's as powerful as it was then. I mean, what a voice, Chuck D! For a cultural voice, just amazing. I think that would be a good episode. I think Loveless would be a good episode as well.
Yeah, we're gonna have no lack of people who are gonna want to talk about that one too. So
yeah, I think it might be nice to talk about. So there's certain artists that get talked about quite a lot, like someone like the Beatles and people like that. They've been excavated so much. There might be nice to talk about. I'm just having a wee look over. There might be nice to talk about things that might not necessarily be talked about in the grand scheme of things. A band that obviously we talked about them earlier, but I would like you to do an episode on Belle and Sebastian as well, just because. I think it would be.
Yeah, like absurdly, Belle and Sebastian for me, and one of our friends who has shown up on the show a few times, through him and to me, for like in just teenagers in Seattle. For some reason, me and him were both huge Belle and Sebastian fans through all the, I think Dear Catastrophe Waitress probably came out after we were out of school, but everything before that, when we were in high school, as absurd as it sounds, two Americans across the entire world were like huge Belle and Sebastian fans. So I'm also really, really excited.
Did we see them in 2003 or 2002? Mm-hmm. Do you recall what year that was?
I don't know the year. I just know that we did.
When I saw them at the Hollywood Bowl in 2006, the Shins supported them, actually. Funny you're talking about the Shins. And they played with the LA Philharmonic Orchestra. Oh. It was funny, and I put this in my review. The day before, so I arrived with PR the day before, and they were doing a run through with the LA Philharmonic, so we went to see it. So in this empty Hollywood Bowl. But whilst we were waiting for the orchestra to get ready and everything, I was stood with the band at the side of the stage at the Hollywood Bowl, which was amazing. But I looked round and it had a list of the acts that were going to be playing at the Hollywood Bowl, and it said tonight. It said the date, Belle and Sebastian, and it had the next day. It said Bugs Bunny.
Oh. No, it was doing like the orchestra.
It was the Bugs Bunny Roadshow. That was what it was. It was the Bugs Bunny Roadshow. So I said in my review for the NME, I said all the stars play the Hollywood Bowl. Frank Sinatra, Beach Boys. I said tonight Belle and Sebastian, tomorrow Bugs Bunny.
That is so cool.
It was brilliant. They were all laughing. How does that work? What does it look like?
Is it going to be like the Gorillas? Are they going to put them on the screen? Yeah, I'm going to have to look that up. What music are you listening to currently?
Well, being a man of a certain age, I find it hard to listen to a lot of new stuff. I find it difficult. I get recommendations from my son. He's the band he's really into at the moment. I've listened to a little bit. Haven't taken to them too much. I must admit, I'm trying. Is a band called Black Country New Road. Have you heard of them?
I've heard of the name.
Yeah, but
I must have heard at least one track.
I like stuff like what was it? What was it? What was I listening to? I mean, I like Lana Del Rey. There's a guy called Hamish Hawk who I really like. little bit psychedelic. Really, really like him. But I will be honest, I don't listen to a whole lot of new music because I'm a father of two. One's 15, one's 8. My daughter's named after Joni Mitchell. My daughter's called Joni. But she's 8. She's only just started listening to music. She but I'll have to admit, I'm totally out the loop, and I feel quite sad saying that to you because I'm such a massive music fan. What I find myself doing is listening to classic old albums. I've got my own Spotify account, and I listen to classic old albums, and I struggle to listen to new stuff because I haven't really got anything to recommend. That sounds so sad. But because
it's relatable,
that's kind
though.
of why we did the list.
Yeah, I mean, I have a 10 and an 8-year-old. As far as I'm aware, the only recording artist that exists right now is Taylor Swift, maybe Chappell Roan. So this podcast has been a great way to really get, out of that bubble and into like a whole new world of music and discover a new artist, old artist, and really just get back into it.
Yeah, we were having kind of having the same problem, and that's another reason why we started the show is, even if we can't get the new artists, all the time, like we can go back and look at, things that we missed over that time frame and at least educate ourselves on that.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one. But during the pandemic, I set myself a little target. So I suppose I'm doing something similar to what you guys are, well, not similar, but a similar similar spirit. During the pandemic, when I was working at home and I was downstairs and I had Spotify, I set myself a target of listening to one album by an artist. I'd choose an album by an artist. I'd have a little look online and think, what's the best thing to choose? And I'd listen to an album by an artist and try and listen to as many different artists as possible. And I got to 1,100, and I've got the list still on my desktop. So I got to 1,100 artists. So there was loads of albums that I'd always thought I will listen to that I'd never listened to before that I got into as a result of doing that little project. But I remember I put it on my Facebook profile and I put the list of the albums. And one of my friends instantly came on, and her comment was, "That is such an Alan Woodhouse thing to do," because I am a little bit of I had a reputation at NME as well of being a bit of an obsessive and a trivia buff, and like I love all the little minotaur music and little and I've got a bit of a strange mind. I've got a good recall about certain things, and that was seen as as I say, a very Alan Woodhouse thing to do. But,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's
man, Alan, I was afraid that I was afraid that we were going to that you were going to run up against a deadline, but I've actually you've outlasted us. I've got a deadline I'm running up. I took work off morning, and now they're calling.
Oh right, well I'll leave it. I better get back home soon
unless my friend has any final pressing questions. I'm
last question.
Such a blessing.
No, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Last question I was going to ask is, you talk about listening to those new bands. And as a dad, I'm kind of curious, how do you ingest new music? For me, it's in the car, and I don't know if that's the best listening experience. Do you kind of carve out time to put on the headphones and do it, in solitary confinement, or you just take it where you can?
I tend to listen to stuff in the car because the kids will want to play it. But mainly, if I have been recommended something with that, I tend to be, because I can just get my head down at work, and especially on not so much on today, a day like today or yesterday, but say on a Thursday and a Friday, because our week kind of goes Thursday to Wednesday because of the way the magazine goes out. I'll put my headphones on at work and just if there's anything being recommended to me or whatever, I will listen to it. That's where I tend to listen to it, because it's where I tend to get the most peace and quiet, and I can get the most concentration.
Yeah,
and my life's completely changed. It's just, and if we're listening to stuff at home, I tend, if me and my wife are listening to things, because we've got similar taste in music. She's quite punky. She loves New York punk. In fact, at our wedding, we had lots of different themed tables, and one of them was New York punk. So she loves Patti Smith and Blondie and Television, Ramones, all that kind of thing. But we'll tend to listen to what we'll tend to do is go, Well, let's listen. Sometimes we'll listen to some new recommendation, but we tend to say what classic album we're going to listen to today. So if there's going to be any new stuff, I tend to listen to it at work, or like you say, in the car. But yeah, I would, and you know what? I get a lot of my new music choices from the radio. I listen to Six Music in the office, and if there's a song I hear, that's one of the good things about streaming services. You can go straight on and go. So what I'll do is, if I hear a new song that I think that's brilliant, I make a playlist with a year. Like, so I've got a 2025 one now. I'll find out what the song is. I'll go onto Spotify and find it, and I'll stick it into the playlist for the year, and then therefore I've got that new song.
And then that's nice because you can go to that track and you can you can hit the artist name or you can hit the album and go
absolutely
right to it and say like, oh, there's the rest of it, or here's their whole discography. So
yeah, I'm totally gonna run with that idea. Yeah.
But it's such a different environment, and it's funny talking about kids because they ingest the music and everything in a completely different way to the way we did. You would have to go out and buy the single or buy the album or whatever, and they can just listen to it, and they can listen to everything at the click of a mouse. Yeah. We didn't do that. We had to seek it out.
I remember you had to dig through a record store for half the stuff, on the NME list for us. I mean, it was like hoping that Barnes and Nobles carries it or the local shop got it in that day, and now click of a button.
Yeah, I remember one time me and my host when we were younger, like we put down tarp and wood chips all over one of my aunt's backyards, and the reward for that was enough money to buy one Warp Records compilation of electronic music. And
your Warp Records fan. Funny you should mention Warp, because I was going to say when you were asking about albums you should pick out, I was also thinking about Selected Ambient Works by Aphex Twin would be a good one as well.
Oh yeah, we can't wait to. That's another reason we picked the list, because back in that time that was kind of a that was something that us and all of our friends had in common, is that we were getting into that era's like IDM and Warp Records. So seeing that on the NME list was another reason we were like, someday we're going to be able to someday we're going to get one of those and we're going to be able to talk about it, and we can't wait.
I think the same shopping trip was that when I bought Godspeed You Black Emperor.
I think so.
Yeah. So talk about, some kind of different taste for a high school kid in the United States in 2001. I mean, we were a little different.
It's funny as well. I don't know why I just thought of this, because I'm changing tack completely. But I think it's because of something you were talking about Belle and Sebastian earlier, and I was saying about how they, I actually see them I see them in a social situation, and that is quite often. There are, where I live in Glasgow, lots of bands live, so I see them quite a lot. See quite a lot of them in social situations. I've bumped into the bassist from Franz Ferdinand in the local supermarket, and I live in the street behind me lives one of Arab Strap lives, and just around the corner from me, one of the Delgados lives, and that was what I was going to get to. Is that they're a band that you're trying to ask me about new music. I don't go out to gigs very often, but when the Delgados reformed last year, was it the year before, I went to see them in Glasgow, and it was absolutely amazing. And it was I remember thinking then, that's the sort of band that I should be plugging when I'm doing lists and things like that, because they don't get the credit they deserve. But yeah, it's just quite funny to see all these people now round about me, but they're all parents, well, virtually all parents, and we're all on school runs or meet each other in supermarkets and things. And I think this just ties in with what you're saying about how we do things differently, like listen to music in the car and whatnot. All our lives have changed. It's incredible. But then it's just weird. I'm probably just rambling. It's just, but there's something else that I was going to say to you about Belle and Sebastian.
You're preaching to the choir, though.
There's something else I was going to say to you about Belle and Sebastian, but I've completely forgotten. Also, they were on The Simpsons recently as well. which is
I saw that pop up, but
but I don't watch The Simpsons anymore. But they were on The Simpsons.
I don't know. I don't remember where it came back, but I was just getting at one of our, we just had the Super Bowl, but I was getting a reminder or something from maybe my Facebook memories that I remember I heard Bell and Sebastian being played as like a bumper into a commercial during the Super Bowl, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening.
It's amazing. Yeah, they're quite they have been quite big in America, haven't they? They played big venues and things. It's amazing. It's nice to be. I think it was basically because when I was at NME, I got all the Scottish bands to do. So give the Scotsmen the Scottish bands, and so it's just quite funny that they're all living round. Loads of them live near me now. Are you a fan of Mogwai at all?
I can't say
definitely enjoy them. Yeah, that's still on the bucket list for live experiences for me.
Oh, amazing! Absolutely amazing, intense, absolutely intense. Up there with My Bloody Valentine for loudest band I've ever heard. But yeah.
I could imagine. Amazing. Yeah. I just want to be front row right against the speakers when I see them, and I might be saying goodbye to my hearing after that.
I was going to say, put some earplugs in. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, we've got a piece in the Big Issue about them next week, about when the guy who's written it is a massive Mogwai fan, and he talks about their new album, but he talks in general about hearing going at gig, about his hearing going from being at too many loud gigs, and he says, it's maybe advisable to wear earplugs, especially when you get to a certain age. See, this is what I do. I just start rambling about music. I'm a pop culture freak. There's so many things that when I get off this call, I'll think I should have spoken to you about, because I just could go on.
I tell you what, if you ever want to come back, just send me the DM. We will do it.
I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to talk whenever
once we get a few more episodes in, we'll be like, we need to tell Alan what we found and what's happened.
Well, I'm happy to. I'm really glad you're doing it. It's a really cool idea. So
we're incredibly blessed to have you. So if we did it again,
well,
I would love it. I had so much fun.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I suppose we should go, shouldn't we? Really,
I guess I'm getting increasingly panicked. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, until the next time, I guess we'll do this again. For
I can't
sure,
believe we get to say that.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
I'm happy to do it again. I've got It's interesting to lead off with these, but then it leads into so many more different conversations. One thing I was going to say earlier is that you were talking about. I'm really still thinking about the metal thing, because I think it's a really good point, and I'm trying to work out, because I've usually got some kind of theory about it, because there were metal fans at the NME. It was like really, and I don't. I just can't quite work out why that would be the case, because someone
it's interesting though. I mean, we talk about 500 as such a big number, but we look at even in the 460s, there's something like Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins, one of the biggest albums of the decade, and it's just like, that's 460. Wow, okay, so there's not enough room almost for everything, but at the same time, like, we got to get a little more metal going on.
Yeah, it's almost like a sort of a blind spot. And it's an interesting one. I remember James McMahon, who wrote in the NME as James Jam. I said this the third time I said this today. I can't believe it. He died just before Christmas. We seem to have had a lot of bad luck with that. Former NME people, losing them all quite young. Anyway, he used to play thrash metal in the office quite a lot. Certainly a lot of Slayer, and he was an Iron Maiden fan. So I'm sure, but he'd gone from the NME by the time the list was made. So I'm sure he would have had something to say about that.
Let me. Okay, so we've got a few people who have said that they would talk to us. So
I was going to ask you about that.
Let me run the names by you, and maybe you can tell us what we should ask them, or what we should be looking for.
Okay.
David Renshaw said yes. Kevin E.G. Perry said yes. And then me and you had, of course, talked about Mark Beaumont said he would be able to give us some time as well.
Well, I know Mark very well, and Mark's the same age as me as well, and he started at NME in the mid-90s. Yeah, he was at NME and Melody Maker, and then at NME permanently. Is a massive, massive pop fan. Mark's the chorus man. He loves like Weezer and Ash and things like that. But he's also got so many. He'll have so many good stories about band. Muse. He loved Muse as well. He'll have so many. He loves a lot of core NME bands from that era, and he was able to. He was very good at going with the times, you know, of constantly updating what he was listening to. He was he'll have so many good stories about being on tour with bands, and he's written books as well. He wrote a book about Muse. He wrote a novel. I would just ask, as I say, what to ask him, I don't know. Just take from his knowledge. There's so much there. Ask him about we used to do pub quizzes together, music quizzes together, and our quiz team. We competed in a league in the noughties at this pub in London, and the team that was up against us in the league was led by Bernard Butler, ex of Suede.
Oh wow!
And we beat them, and we won a trip to Amsterdam. So that was quite good. So you might want to ask him about that. But Mark, like, I don't know, like your Suedes, your Muses, your pops. He's got so much. So he's got so much knowledge. A lot more. He's worked there for longer than I have. In fact, I think he probably still writes for NME from time to time. But he's just got he'll have so much to give you, so much. Kevin, sorry, go on.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say Mark wrote the introduction to the actual list as well.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, that's where we got our info on like how it had been put together and right. the initial idea of what it was like around the time, you know, it was getting together as well.
Well, he was like a foremost NME writer. He was like, he got a lot of the big assignments. He was. I used to go to the pub with him, and he'd quite often bring in an indie musician to the quiz or whatever that from various different bands. I remember he brought Tim Wheeler from Ash to the quiz one night and things like that. He just knew so many people. He lived quite near me in London as well, so we'd see quite a lot of each other on a social basis. But yeah, Mark's he'll just have endless stories. So whether it is anything specific, I can't think. He knows he knew all the big bands. He knew all of them. So yeah. maybe not so much Oasis, but all the rest of them.
Yeah, and same with that. Same with having you. Just the concept of being able to talk to the people who put together the list. Like we'll take whatever we can get.
I've been talking to you primarily about music. I haven't even given you some of my stories. Like ending, like there's so many ridiculous stories.
I'll leave. That'll be our teaser.
Yeah.
Stories with Alan as well.
Do you want to
call you about next?
Do you want to give us a favorite story of yours to end on here?
Yeah, there is one that sticks out for me because it's a band I mentioned earlier. Although there's a few that I'd like to tell you, but the one that sticks out for me is in 2006 we were at Reading Festival, and I was in the sort of where our cabin was that we worked in was in the backstage area, and I was outside the cabin in the afternoon on the Friday, just having a pint, just because I think I was having a little bit of a break, and Chrissy, who's the features editor at the time, ended up becoming NME editor later. She came up to me and said, "Don't have too many of those." I went, "Why not?" She went, "You're going on stage with Franz Ferdinand tonight," and I was like, "They were headlining Reading, right?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "Oh, the one of the songs they've got like 10 extra drummers, and they want you to be one of the drummers." And I was like, "You're joking?" And she was like, "No, they've asked for you," because I did quite a lot of stuff with them. As I say, I did all the Scottish bands. So, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And I'd been at Reading in 1992 when Kurt Cobain got wheeled on stage by Everett True, the Melody Maker journalist. That was my first ever festival. And I'm thinking, I'm going to be on. What you said to me in 1992, you're going to be on that stage with the headliners in 2006. I would have thought, how do I get from A to B? How does that happen? That is literally the weirdest thing ever. And so I just still, even before it happened, I still didn't think it was going to happen. And then I get suddenly the PR from Franz Ferdinand slaps this Access All Airs pass on me, says, right, come with me. And I went up on stage, and then I get taken around the back of the stage, and there's all the other drummers there, including the drummer from Madness, and the drummer from the Cribs, the drummer from the Long Blondes, all the other bands that were around that day. And they're like, right, we're going to give you a quick drumming lesson. So I'm trying to do this drumming lesson with Woody from Madness. Complete Madness was one of my first ever albums. And I'm thinking, this doesn't get any weirder, right? It did get weirder. So eventually you get called out. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I thought, well, the drums will be at the back of the stage. They weren't. They were at the front of the stage. So I stood there.
So this is something they're doing to you.
Yeah. I'm stood there. I took a glance at the crowd, and I had to turn away. It was like there's people as far as the eye could see. I thought, I can't look at that. Anyway, so I start doing it. I'm doing it the best I can. And about halfway through, I look round at the band, because the band are just to my right. They're only a few feet away from me. And obviously, I'm seeing them totally different. It's like they're just playing. Not like they're on a massive stage because of the way I was looking at them. And Alex Kapranos, the singer from Franz Ferdinand, the guitarist singer from Franz Ferdinand, catches my eye just as I did that and winked at me. And I was just like, oh my God. I asked him about it afterwards and said, did I imagine that? And he said, no, I just knew you'd be nervous, so I was just trying to make you feel. And I was like, so anyway, I did it. Eventually, I looked out the crowd near the end and thought, now I know why bands have egos. This is amazing, right? And then at the end of the song, I went to go off the stage, and I looked around, and one of the other drummers was throwing his sticks into the crowd, and I thought, right, I'm going to do that as well, because I'm never going to get the chance to do this again, and flung them over the barrier as far as I could, and I saw someone catching them and waved to the crowd, and then I was just like, did that really just happen? And then it gets even weirder. My phone rings about 10 minutes later, once I've stood there, trying not to cry. I was so overwhelmed by it. And my brother phoned. It was my brother. And I was like, hello. He went, I think I've just seen you on the telly. Says, were you on stage with Franz Ferdinand? I went, yeah. No. He went, I thought I was. He said, I was getting high. I thought that I thought that I was imagining it. And I was like, no, it was me. And he's like, oh my God, I wish I'd known I would have recorded it. And I was just like,
incredible.
But then also my friend that was at Reading, he met up with me afterwards, and he went, oh, I decided not to go to Franz Ferdinand. I went to Primal Scream. Did I miss anything? And I went, yeah.
You got to tell him.
Yeah.
Well, you missed a little bit.
Yeah.
You might have headlined Reading, yeah.
So that's quite a good story, isn't it?
That's an amazing story.
That's pretty damn good right there, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I can. I think I'm going to have to leave it at that, because I can't really top that. It was...
Yeah.
So... It was.
Thank you so much for coming on with us. And
that's okay. It was a pleasure
being our first one too.
And well, I hope I've been useful, because I tend to ramble. So please edit me down if you.
So we do. I doubt we will, but thank you so much for coming on.
That's a pleasure, and good luck with it all.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry about the lights and gear.
All right.
You guys so take care and good luck with it. So how do I access this podcast then? What's it called?
It's called The Indie 500 with INDIE. Okay, I'm gonna hit stop on the recording though.